Have you ever tried with all your might to just push a thought out of your head, only to find it roaring back even stronger? It's so frustrating, right? It feels like our brains have a mind of their own. Well, today we're going to dig into why that happens and what's really going on inside our heads.
Okay, let's start with a little experiment. I want you to try something for me. Ready? For the next 5 seconds, whatever you do, do not think of a white bear. Go. So, what's on your mind? I am willing to bet that a big, fluffy, polar creature just stomped its way right into your brain. If it did, don't worry. You've just run smack into one of the biggest paradoxes of the human mind. Now, this isn't just a fun little party trick. It's actually a famous psychological experiment known as the white bear problem. And it's the perfect example of how our attempts to control our own thoughts can just spectacularly backfire on us. So what's the science behind this? Well, it's something called ironic process theory, which was developed by social psychologist Daniel Wegner. And the theory is pretty simple. The very act of trying not to think about something makes you even more likely to think about it. It's ironic.
And here's where it gets really interesting. See, your brain basically has two systems working against each other here. First, there's the operator. That's your conscious mind, the part that's actively trying to think of, a red car, a green tree, anything but a white bear. But then, in the background, you've got the monitor. Think of it like a security guard. Its only job is to scan for the forbidden thought, to make sure you're not thinking it. But to do that, it has to constantly check for the white bear. So what happens when you get tired or stressed? Well, the operator gets worn out and gives up. But that pesky monitor, it never gets tired. It just keeps working, pushing that white bear right back to the front of your mind. Okay, so this whole effect isn't just about random white bears. It gets way more powerful when we start talking about the really complicated stuff, like our memories and emotions. I mean, why is it that some memories, especially the ones we'd rather forget, seem to have this special kind of superglue?
Well, neuroscientists have found that our brains use two totally different pathways for memory. You've got voluntary recall. That's when you're actively trying to remember something like, where did I leave my keys? Your brain is deliberately focusing, zooming in on specific details. But then there's involuntary recall. This is when a song on the radio suddenly yanks you back to a memory from when you were a kid. It's triggered by broad sensory stuff. And that's why these memories can feel so vivid and just come out of nowhere. And that's exactly why these involuntary memories feel so intrusive. They aren't neat and tidy. A vague smell, a piece of a song, that's all it takes to pull an entire memory, with all its feelings, right into your consciousness, totally hijacking your attention. Scientists call this cognitive interference, and it can literally derail your entire train of thought. Right, so that explains how these memories pop up. But it brings us to a really important question. If our brains can pull up any memory, why does it seem to have this weird preference for the negative ones? The painful ones, the embarrassing ones? Well, the answer comes down to our evolution. It's a little thing called the negativity bias. You see, our brains didn't evolve to make us happy all the time. They evolved to keep us alive. And keeping us alive means being incredibly sensitive to threats, dangers, and mistakes. This quote right here just nails it. Think about it from our ancestors' perspective. Remembering that a certain berry made you sick? Well, that's critical for survival. Forgetting that could be a fatal mistake. But forgetting how nice the sunset looked? Yeah, not so much. Our brains are basically hardwired to prioritize information that protects us. It's a survival feature, not a psychological bug. So, we know our brains are on high alert for threats. But there's another kind of thought that latches on with that same intensity: unfinished business. This phenomenon is known as the Zeigarnik effect. It was first observed by a psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik, who noticed something fascinating in a restaurant. She saw that the waiters could remember every single detail of an unpaid order, but the second the bill was paid, poof, the memory of that order completely vanished.
And you see this effect used against us all the time, especially with TV shows. They pull you into a story, get you to a super high-stakes moment, and then cliffhanger. They're creating what's called a cognitive tension. Your brain absolutely hates leaving things unresolved, and that feeling keeps the show rattling around in your head all week, pretty much guaranteeing you're going to tune in for the next episode.
This also explains those thoughts that seem to pop into your head completely at random. Turns out, they're often not random at all. A really subtle cue in your environment, a sound, a particular smell, can trigger the memory of a task or a goal you left unfinished, even if it was years ago. Okay, so we can't always control our thoughts. Our memories are biased toward bad news, And our brains are constantly nagging us about unfinished tasks. That sounds kind of bleak. So what can we actually do about it? Well, the key, it seems, is to stop fighting against our brains and start working with them.
The cool thing is we can actually use these mental quirks to our advantage. Take paradoxical intention. For someone with insomnia, instead of stressing about falling asleep, they might actually try to stay awake. Ironically, that can reduce the anxiety and help them drift off. Or you can use the Zeigarnik effect with something called the Hemingway effect. Stopping a task mid-sentence actually makes it easier to pick back up later because it's unfinished. And for all those intrusive thoughts, mindfulness teaches us to just acknowledge them. Let them float by like clouds without fighting them. When you stop struggling, they lose their power. Ultimately, it all boils down to acceptance.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Your brain is a survival machine, fine-tuned over millions of years. Its primary job is to keep you safe, not necessarily to keep you comfortable or happy. The real question isn't how to win a war against your own mind. The question is, now that you know the rules it plays by, how will you navigate that gap between what your brain was built for and the kind of life you actually want to lead?